Today is August 27th, 2021. I'm BrentNally, and I'm really excited to be here with Harold Katcher, who has a new book coming out September 4th, 2021, The Illusion of Knowledge. Harold, thank you so much for having me here and agreeing to do this interview.
No, my pleasure. Yeah, I just want to spread the word, as it were, that there's actual hope for human rejuvenation, perhaps even human immortality, and it depends on science, on knowledge. It's the same knowledge that brings us, of all animals on Earth, the fact that we're going to age and die can be used to counteract that aging and dying. Okay, well, my name is Harold Katcher. I was an academic. I did research. I did cancer research. I was one of the discoverers of the first breast cancer gene, BRCA1. I was academic director for the University of Maryland Asian Division, and now I'm the chief scientific officer of Yuvan Research. In spite of the fact that I'm 77 years old, my mind is still quite active, and I'm able to do the work, and I intend to finish the job. So far, we've demonstrated the principle that rejuvenation, we're not the only ones, but we've demonstrated the principle that rejuvenation is possible. In our latest studies, we've seen rejuvenation occur at levels we never expected. And now it's a question of engineering. It's not a question of basic principles. It's not a question of, is it possible? The answer is yes, it is possible. It can be done. It has been done in rats, and it can be done, and it will be done in humans.
So Harold, the way I'd love this interview to go is, first of all, reference some other interviews that you've done that are on YouTube that I've watched that I think are really important to this story. So Ira Pastor, who is a friend and does longevity interviews, just interviewed you yesterday. I had the opportunity to watch that. I thought it was fantastic. I'll have that linked in the description below here in this video. So I encourage everybody to check that out, because it's a kind of a complex story. We're going to do our best to just
complex story,
explain the high level. I want to really emphasize the credibility of your academic career, your entire story, what you just outlined with your contributions to the scientific community, with the contributions with the breast cancer, BRCA gene being, your contributions there, and other things. We'll get into that.
Yeah.
And so we also have to talk about what's in your book, which I've only had the opportunity to read just the beginning of it, because it's not even out till September 4th. Nicolas Chernavsky, who's a dear friend, is behind the camera here in your apartment in Mountain View, California. Nicolas, I just got to meet you for the first time in person. It's kind of strange when you communicate with people nowadays on the internet and then meet them in person for the first time. But yeah, the book event is coming up September 4th, 2021. That's going to be here in San Francisco. And what's the name of the book place again?
Book Passage and Ferry Building.
Book Passage and Ferry Building. So we're trying to determine if they have the Wi-Fi capabilities to actually live stream this, or if we'll have to, record it. But they have up to 60 people for capacity. I'm going to go there and do some testing to see how strong their internet is later today.
It's 3 p.m. on Saturday, September 4th.
3 p.m. Saturday, September 4th. So if you're in the San Francisco Bay Area or close like me, I'm in El Dorado Hills. I just drove 2.5 hours to be here. I plan on being there September 4th. Yeah, it's an honor to be here. Harold, thank you for agreeing to do this. So if you're watching this before then and you want to attend, it's free to attend, and it's there. And yeah, so there's that. I'll also link Nicolas's interview that he did with you, I believe was in February 2021, about 6 months ago. I watched that then. I rewatched it on the drive here, so we'll kind of go over some points there. Again, linked in the show notes in the description below. Highly encourage people to watch that. As well as Richard's YouTube channel, Modern Health Span, has interviewed you and kind of kept up with the story. So this is all really good content. And then we have the actual paper that was published, co-authored with Dr. Steve Horvath, very pioneer. We'll get into him as well too. That was May 2020. Highly encourage people to read that. It's a pretty quick read. I'll have that linked in the show notes of the description as well. So this is real stuff that's pretty exciting. Harold, can you tell us a little bit more about your background, please?
Okay. I suppose I was a late bloomer. Anyway, let me just say I finally graduated college after time, and I became a junior high school teacher. But I felt this was not my life, although my students loved me. And I decided to go get a degree in biology because I really enjoyed biology. I had a physics degree to begin with. I thought, I'm really not smart enough to make any major contribution to physics. I don't know if anybody is. But so I majored in then what was the beginning of what is now called molecular biology, because I was interested in biology and the mechanisms by which it worked. And to me, the main point of biology was how life worked and how death and aging worked as well.
Right.
Because I can remember since being a kid lying in bed thinking, what's the purpose of life?
Yeah.
You reproduce and then you die, and that's about it. So I wanted to understand aging, and by the time the 70s arrived, we had already formed what they call a modern synthesis of aging, which was basically that aging was caused by an accumulation of unrepaired damage. And your lifespan could be extended if you could, for instance, prevent that damage. And there came the whole antioxidant craze that swept the world, and still is sweeping the world.
Right.
Even though it has apparently no effect on lifespan
still see it
or
in
anything
commercials.
else.
Like, this drink has lots of antioxidants and stuff.
Yeah,
It's like,
right,
great.
right. Natural antioxidants might be better than the pill form, but the fact is, the best you can do is slow aging if you could prevent those quote damages, unrepaired damages, and if you do that, the best you can do is extend old age, because nobody's going to start taking them very young, and it seems to have very little effect in any case, even if they do. So the best you could do is extend senescence, and senescence, I can tell you from a personal point of view, is not the greatest thing in the world.
Can you define senescence in case we have an audience?
Well, I mean, senescence basically is just growing old. You know, the fact is you lose a lot of your senses. Yeah, for instance, your sense of hearing is based on what are called hair cells. They have nothing to do with hairs. They just produce cilia, which are hair-like structures. And they're the ones that receive the sound vibrations in your inner ear, and they translate into electrical impulses. As you age, you begin to lose them. They're stem cells that grow into them, and those stem cells stop growing into them, and you start losing hair cells, and you start losing hearing. Particularly, I think it's in the higher frequencies that you lose your hearing first. And
it's the melanocyte stem cells that actually produce the pigmentation for the color of our hair. So when those melanocytes get depleted, our hair starts to turn gray. We've done a couple episodes of Lifespan News, a show that I host on that. But I want to, real quick, before we keep going down this path, I want to rewind and make sure that everybody knows like what basically Yuvan Research, which is the company you're the chief science officer of, is claiming or proposing. I don't even know the right word. I'll let you choose it. But it's E5, and it is an incredible product. A concoction that you have basically discovered from many, many years of research with a little bit of luck, I think is the language you use. I'll let you.
I'm not sure if luck is the exact word for it, but
I thought I heard you say that a little bit of luck was involved, but you've pored over this research for decades, right? It's not like
I have
was
pored over this research for decades. I had been, as I said, interested in aging research. And when I bought into the modern synthesis that aging was the result of irreparable damages, I said to myself, there's no way of repairing the trillions of cells that we have that are irreparably damaged. It's like trying to sweep back the tides with a broom. So I had totally given up, in spite of the fact that Aubrey de Grey, in his, I must say, he's a supporter of ours. I don't want to say anything negative, but the entire attitude that nature had somehow made a mistake and that we were going to solve nature's or correct nature's mistake and live longer. It kind of presupposes that life has been evolving to live longer, and there's absolutely no evidence for any of that. The oldest creatures in the world are things like sponges that are the oldest animals that are 12,000 years old. And those occurred at the beginning of time, and they haven't recently evolved. Lifespan must have some other basis, and what these lifespan theory or modern theory, this so-called modern synthesis of aging, fails to take into account is what aging has to do, if anything, because according to them, it's just random mutations that are protected from being eliminated because they only occur when you're old, past reproductive age. There's an intrinsic circular reasoning in that, which is people have failed to point out over the centuries, which is that these genes are protected because you reproduce less as you age. But why do you reproduce less as you age? Because you age.
Right, yeah.
So aging is caused by aging.
Right, yeah. And so I want to say something just about Aubrey de Grey, and then just in general. I've been just personally, I'm 36 years old. I've been researching this stuff for about 15 years. Quit my job at LinkedIn, Microsoft about 3.5 years ago to travel the world with my wife in 2018. And so then I've been researching aging pretty much full time for approximately the last 2.5 years or so. We're in August 2021 right now. And I hear a lot of, in my opinion, very credible and very well-credentialed people, well-respected people like Aubrey de Grey, like David Sinclair, like yourself, like Greg Fay, like many others. Not because I didn't mention anybody right here doesn't mean they're not very credible, respected people. I just don't want to go on and on. There's a lot of people.
Vij, Syed, Albert Einstein.
Yeah. But what I hear as well is a lot of people, will tell me privately, oh, well, this person doesn't know that, or they this or that. And there's a lot of infighting. So for me, I'm focused on the truth. I'm really focused on solving aging as quickly as possible. And the reason is because we have about 110,000 people that die from aging or age-related diseases every day on average globally. And now with this COVID-19, the foremost risk factor for morbidity and mortality of COVID-19 is aging. So basically, we solve aging. COVID-19 is, I won't say completely gone, but it's basically nowhere near the impact here. So that's what's on the line. I just want to share kind of my perspective here, and I don't know the truth of any of this stuff. All I know is that what I could find on YouTube, what we're recording here. I'm really looking forward to read your book. Steve Horvath is incredibly credible in my opinion. Co-authoring that paper with him in May of 2020 I thought was awesome. I thought it's a great paper. I interviewed Didier Coeurnelle in February 2020 on my channel. I'll have that linked in the description. I interviewed Rodolfo or Rudy Goya. I'll let you tell more about them. And then I also had a private conversation with Dobri Kiprov, the MD, PhD, who's now in San Francisco. I'll let you, I see you rolling your eyes a little, I'll let you talk about him a little bit and his albumin.
I don't really want to talk about him.
Okay, fair enough. the point is like I've kind of gone down the rabbit hole here, but still, this is just the beginning of this story with Yuvan Research and E5.
Just the beginning.
And the future is what's most exciting. So,
yeah. I mean, as I say, I'll give you the story in a semi-condensed form.
Beautiful.
Suddenly, in 2009, I was retired, basically, and I read a paper, an old paper, a paper from 4 years before by Irena Conboy was the first author, I think. Michael Conboy, Thomas Rando, Amy Wagers, and from Irv Weissman's lab, a couple of other people I didn't mention, but they're also important. And they did an experiment where they, it's such a cruel experiment. I can't even understand how an ethics committee could allow such a thing, but I'm glad they did. Because what they did is they stitched together two rats, an old rat and a young rat. And you must understand that an old rat is about twice the size of a young rat. And they showed, now this had been shown before in a very, and they showed that they could rejuvenate the stem and progenitor cells of the old rat and bring them to a level sort of midway between old and young. So, to me, this was a revelation. To me, this completely changed everything I'd thought about aging. I realized if this were a possibility, then it is impossible that cumulative damage causes aging. Because if you can rejuvenate a cell, unless you can repair all of that damage, and all of that damage has to be repaired internally, in which case, why doesn't the cell repair itself?
Real quick, Harold, it could be possible that this cumulative damage could be contributing in some aspect to the progression of the aging process.
Absolutely.
But it's not necessarily the cause. Everybody,
No, not the cause. The way I see it, in any case, what the signals are that bring us from progression from fertilized egg to embryo to fetus to newborn to school child, etc. I don't know. But it seems that once you reach adulthood, the signal for progression is loss or damage. And as damage accumulates, it leads to further changes, leading to further damage. And the whole purpose, of course, is to end your life. Because a life is a four-dimensional object. It has a beginning and it has an end. It's not so much a process as something you're given. You're given a life. You're not just given a bunch of enzymes and cofactors, and you're given a life, and the life is programmed. From a baby, you learn how to crawl, and you learn how to walk, and you learn how to run, and it all continues like that. And according to classical biology, it ends at adulthood. But every one of us can see, we can look at people and determine that this is a person who is between 30 and 50 at least. You're a person who seems to be in his 30s. You seem to...
Real quick,
we don't talk about women's ages.
Harold's pointing to the documentary film crew that's following him around, and you might see bring it down a little bit, Lena. Yeah, so you might see that there. So that's the film crew, just in case people were wondering. And so that's a whole different story, which is exciting. But yeah, please continue, Harold.
Oh, okay.
You were just saying you can see that aging is certainly programmed to a certain extent.
You can tell that a person is 65 versus a person is 35. It's not a question of just degeneration. Your hair doesn't come out in patches singularly, one at a time, in a random pattern. It occurs in a pattern. It's a progression. It's the fact that developmental biology doesn't recognize this progression past adulthood is, to me, surprising and a deficit.
Well, with Steve Horvath's clocks that he's pioneered and developed, and we can get into that, I'd say that does recognize that, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because it's showing, so Grim Age, Steve Horvath's, one of his clocks is the best predictor of mortality and morbidity of any single clock. I think that we can get even better predictors of mortality and morbidity if we combine Grim Age with other clocks and stuff like Pheno Age.
Steve has a number of clocks. He even has a mammal clock that can tell the age of any mammal, given the same homologous DNA information. If it's a mouse, it's 27 months old. If it's a man, he's 74 years old. If it's a dog, he's 14 years old.
And so I hear, getting back to like the maybe some of the infighting, I'd call it the nerd fights of geroscience. Is aging programmed or is aging not programmed?
Yeah, I'm not interested in any of that. I have nothing to sell.
Okay. Yeah. But what is? What is your perspective?
It's not exactly true because we do have Yuvan Research, and that we think is the future. Back in India, as I was saying, I'll give you a brief. We tried doing what I originally wanted to do, which was heterochronic plasma exchange, exchanging the plasma of old rats for the plasma of young rats, and see what happened. That's why we chose rats instead of mice, because they have larger veins, easier to work with. Unfortunately, large as the veins were, they weren't large enough when we could absolutely not find any way of doing plasma exchange with the rats. And my time in India was almost up. It was given to me by Akshay, who provided the funding and the research help and et cetera. And
Akshay Sangeev is your business partner at Yuvan Research.
Correct.
He's a
Co-founder.
financier, entrepreneur, co-founder, right? And he's here in Mountain View in this same...
He was here in this room but a second ago. And
I haven't got to meet him. Hopefully after the interview, maybe, yeah.
So I said, okay, let's try something. Let's figure out what... let me just say this. E5 is not simply a discovery, it's also an invention. So I did a lot of reading and I made a lot of assumptions and took a lot of chances and left India, giving the last injections to the rats together with Shraddha, our warrior princess. And I left for the United States and said, well, it doesn't work. At least I don't have to go back to India again, which is 20 hours in the air.
And what timeline are we talking about here, approximately? Is this
last
last year?
We're talking about, say, last year.
Okay. September-ish? Is that...
I'd have to look through my
okay.
notes.
Sometime in 2020.
I'm very, very much a person of the moment.
Sure thing.
I have no history.
No problem.
So, what was I going to say? So finally, I was leaving. I have to find out. I do have to find out. I left, and I expected that it wouldn't work, and that I'd just go back to computer programming and maybe write some software that could make me some money, or at least give me some entertainment. Because I was retired, and it's my only hobby. And then I got an email saying it worked. And
the email from Steve Horvath.
No.
Okay.
This is well before that.
Gotcha.
This is
So then this must have been well before 2020 then, right? Because you co-authored the paper with Steve Horvath in May 2020.
That's correct. It's well before 2020.
Gotcha.
Okay. Yeah, so we looked at our results. We saw a tremendous increase in grip strength. We saw a tremendous decrease in inflammatory cytokines, And we sacrificed the animals after 30 days, unfortunately. I would have liked to have kept them longer.
And that's because of money, right? What's the
It
main
was
reason?
because of money, two, because we could hardly believe the results, and we wanted to have concrete data on organ levels of antioxidants and things like glutathione and
So that's what I always hear from researchers is why do they sacrifice usually mice, but any animals? It's number one, money. It's expensive to keep the experiments going.
Correct.
Number two, when you sacrifice them, you can examine them and study them, all the tissues and things. And so then that's where Didier Coeurnelle comes in with specifically funding $25,000 donation to specifically see if these rats can live
longer,
past the maximum lifespan of rats, which for these dog sprawly rats is, I think, none of them have ever lived past 4 years, right?
I think I have a friend, Jeff Bowles, who's known in the Asian community, and he says he has the record for the world's oldest rat, and it's 4 years and a month or something like that. Yeah.
And what can we get? I guess now is a great time. Can we get an update on the status of the rats? I know I was just saying, in Ira Pastor's interview with Harold yesterday, they had a little video. So again, check the description. I'll link Ira's interview with Harold from yesterday. But any other details you can give us about the rats?
Except that none of them have died.
None in the treatment group.
Yeah, none in the treated group have died, and some in the untreated group have died. And I think we're supposed to get that information to someone, but I'm not. I have to get a full report myself. But the surprising thing is, and this is what we didn't see at first. You know, we did that first experiment. We sacrificed the rats after 30 days, and we got amazing results. For instance, the glutathione, which always goes down through aging, went up to 71% of youthful levels when it was down at 20 or 30% of youthful levels. And this was the same with just about every chemical. And we did a number of tests. So we couldn't really believe it, so we had to do it again, of course. And this time we used more rats. We used 8 rats instead of 6 rats, and we get pretty much identical results for all of the different rats. And at the end of 30 days, they were gonna sacrifice the rats again. And I said, no, let's not do that. Let's at least give them another. Let's see what happens to them, and we had seen what we had seen was that in terms of cytokines, that the rats within about a week of an injection, their cytokine levels started dropping precipitously, and within about 2 weeks they had reached youthful levels, and then they started to climb up again at a higher than normal rate. So it's as though somehow these rats had remembered their age. And then, instead of sacrificing them, and this is about 90 days after the first injection, instead of sacrificing them, we gave them a second injection, a second treatment. The treatment consists of 4 injections.
Okay. Over about
alternate
1 week,
days.
Right? Alternate days.
Alternate days, so about a week.
Okay.
And
also, just real quick, you anticipate, from the best you know, that would be what we would do in humans as well.
Yes.
It would be about 4 injections, alternate days, about 7-8 days, and then you think maybe you do that every 8 years or so.
That's what it translates to if you take rat years.
Right.
Because 2.5 human. 1 human month is about 2.5 rat years.
Right, so it might not translate perfectly, but that's
right.
the best guess as of this time.
Right.
And then the hope or the idea is if, like, for example, my wife's grandmother, she's 97 years old right now, and let's just say she's not in her best state of health that she has been her whole life. She's 97, right? The idea is that if she were to take E5 at this, every 8 years, as we just described the protocol, what is the thinking of what we could actually? I mean, can we take her to?
So let me continue with the Coeurnelle study because that kind of answers the question.
Okay.
So we detected all these biochemical and physiological and cognitive improvements to youthful levels, and I'll tell you about Steve Horvath later. We actually used Steve Horvath himself used his clock to determine that we had reversed aging.
All of his clocks, the Grim Age, the Pheno Age that he developed with Morgan Levine, the 2013 original Pan clock, and the skin and blood clock as well.
Correct.
Right.
That's correct. Very good.
And I'll just say, I'm just real quick. I'm not trying to plug too much, but I am trying to do everything I can to slow, stop, and reverse aging for as many people as possible. I'm the co-founder of Longevity Plan, and we're currently negotiating a contract with the Clock Foundation, which is co-founded by Bobby Brook and Steve Horvath. So hopefully that will be available soon, and it would be the only way to get it would be that I know of would be through our website Longevity Plan. So I'm really excited, and hopefully that will be in the next few days, and we can start getting people to test themselves with those 4 tests I just mentioned through the Clock Foundation kit. It'll just be a kit send to your house, and you give a blood sample, and then the key is getting retested. I mean, it's cool to figure out what biological age you are right now, but if we can actually start to show human age reversal in humans, and then tie this in if humans start taking E5 soon, then we can really do this in a decentralized way in the free market using these tests to really scientifically validate this at the most prestigious level possible, right?
Yeah, we're pleased with that.
So we'll talk about it.
I knew nothing about it, but I was going to say we saw all these physiological and biochemical parameters, but the rats look still like old rats. Now, due to Didier Coeurnelle's study, we were able to extend so that we're 90 days past the second rejuvenation. And that's where you saw the film.
In Ira Pastor's video.
In Ira Pastor's video. And here you can definitely see that the treated rat looks younger. Just look at the tail, for example. The tail of the untreated rat is scaly and corroded. The treated rat has a nice, smooth pink tail. Its fur is definitely younger looking, and it's much more shapely. I mean, I'm not really into rats.
Me neither. I'm into humans. We're into saving human lives. The rats are.
But it's very clear that the treated rat looks like a younger rat, and then the behavior, while the untreated control rat with big C on its back is kind of just lying there, like I spend many of my days, just lying there like a lump. The young, it's not young, it's the treated, they're identically aged. The treated rat is all around the place, standing up, looking over the top of his little box at the world, and inquisitive and active, and I mean, the difference is just so startling. It startled me. I was surprised and quite happy to see it.
This just very recently happened, right? Just in the last few
happened
weeks, right?
Within the last 2 weeks, yes.
Okay. That's great.
So,
and do you know how old those rats are chronologically, approximately?
I think they're 34 months old at this point.
Okay, that's
so they're pretty close to their end for most rats.
Right. Yeah, because
maximum lifespan.
That's almost 3 years, and we just established that these Sprague Dawley rats, the longest they've ever been documented to live in the laboratory is about 4 years, and they're almost 3.
Yeah.
And so, if this you guys have enough funding to continue this experiment for at least another year to maybe push
do.
him past that maximum lifespan of over 4 years, correct? Yeah, and that alone will be big news if that happens.
Yeah, and I don't know what at this point. Of course, we all know that Josh Middledorf had an accident. He was going to do some sort of statistical analysis of showing that if a certain number of our control rats died and our treated rats didn't, he could predict their maximum lifespan. But I don't know what's happening with all of that at this point. I haven't actually spoken to Josh.
I haven't spoken with Josh recently either. We wish him a speedy recovery.
Yeah, exactly.
So one question I've had, Harold, so, it was called Elixir and changed it to E5, just, for whatever.
This guy was called, Elixir was a working name, but it was from the Latin elixir vitae, the elixir of life that the ancients sought, along with the philosopher's stone. And
is there any meaning behind the E5? What is there with the 5, or where did that name come from? I'm just curious.
The E, I suppose, comes from elixir, and
Right.
the 5, Akshay says, is a lucky number.
Okay.
So,
And another question I was curious on, those rats we were just talking about, is that in Mumbai? Or
Mumbai.
Okay, that's what I thought. And so obviously you and Akshay are here in Mountain View, California, where we are now. We just
Right.
established that. Who's running the lab, and how is that all being conducted?
Kavita Singh is running the lab, and she has a number of graduate students, and that's how it's being conducted. And Shraddha's part of our family at this point. They all are. So Mudasir is there. Yeah, we have people there. We have people here, and we coordinate. They can do things we can't do. They have. Oddly enough, we came to America thinking everything would be so much easier. It just took forever, for instance, to order antibodies. You had to go through a huge bureaucracy.
In Mumbai, right?
In Mumbai.
Yeah.
But we came to the United States, we found everything is much worse.
Yeah.
There's equipment we just don't have here. Because of the COVID crisis, there's essential tools that we need, that we spend weeks and weeks waiting for, and finally, when they're supposed to arrive, we notice they'll be here in 2 weeks. And, it's continual, and but we've been making progress. And our major job is now to scale up to mass production for humans and perhaps dogs.
Okay, so yeah, let's talk about scaling at this point and humans and plans like that. So one thing that I've heard you say a couple times, I think in interviews, is that the good news for E5 is that the actual ingredients that go into making it, which we'll get into it's proprietary.
Very proprietary.
But the good news is that the ingredients are very available.
Correct.
So they're widely known, it's just not known what they are. So
Correct.
that's the really good news. So from a scaling perspective, it seems that you're optimistic that we can get E5 within a reasonable amount of time, hopefully within a couple of years or so, with distributed globally into
Yes.
human beings if it's
Yes.
continued to show safety and efficacy
Yes.
in these rats. So can we talk about, at this point here in August, realistic timeline? Is it, realistic in getting this in a human by the end of this year, next year? What can you say about that at this point?
Probably not by the end of this year. By the end of next year, I would think so.
Okay. Are you going to be the first, or who's going to be the first? How are we going to make those decisions?
Technically, am I going to be the first to use it? I certainly. We plan on human trials. I certainly intend to use it. I volunteered to be a guinea pig together with that billionaire I was talking about.
Right.
For heterochronic plasma exchange.
Right.
I said, I'll sit in the bed right next. I'll have the bed right next to you. Cot, whatever they use. Yeah, I mean, sad to say, this fellow ultimately was fearful of trying the procedure.
The billionaire fellow.
The billionaire fellow.
Right.
And he was dead within a year. he'd listened to his doctor who said, don't do it.
Right.
It's not safe.
Right.
And he was dead within a year. He was 90 at the time.
Right.
So.
How many times have we seen that?
Yeah.
I like Bill Falloon on his YouTube channel, Church of Perpetual Life. You know, they have a church in, I think it's around Fort Lauderdale in southern Florida. And when these very wealthy billionaires die, like I remember when Paul Allen died in 2018 and many others, he kind of, you know, in his presentations at the church, he kind of shames them. He's like, hey, you know, you've had all this money, you were trying to do all this research. It's mind-boggling that this biorejuvenation science is so far advanced, yet, I mean, this video on YouTube isn't going to get that many views. I don't have that big of an audience, but there is incredibly real science going on right now and serious people. It's quite a conundrum. What can you say about this conundrum? Well, there isn't more interest in this, yet people are obsessed on all the wrong paths.
Ignorance.
Yeah.
You know, they hear a word, whether it's mRNA or GDF11, and they just go wild on it and think it's the cure-all for everything, and eventually they're disappointed and it disappears, and we've just seen it time and time again.
Right. Well, hopefully that will all be changing relatively soon. In the next few months and years.
It will be. We will change it. If we don't change it, someone will change it, because I think the principles are now well established. Forgetting about E5 for the second, just think about OSKM, the so-called Yamanaka factors.
Right.
They have been used successfully to rejuvenate animals. Now they have a rather unfortunate habit of producing certain cancers called teratomas, but that's a side effect. The basic principle is there, and Steve Horvath has shown it, that you're actually resetting the epigenetic clock.
Right. And David Sinclair's lab, I believe it was Wang Qing Li, is his graduate student that came to David a few years ago and said, hey, why don't we use 3 of the 4 Yamanaka genes or factors? Yeah. And Dr. Yamanaka is a Japanese scientist who I believe won the Nobel Prize for this discovery in 2013. And so they, at David Sinclair's lab at Harvard Medical School, David's a geneticist, they used 3 of the 4 Yamanaka factors in the eyes of an old mice, and they showed biological age reversal, rejuvenation through every measurable way possible, including Steve Horvath, and the mice was blind and then it could see again. Yeah. And so I guess it's incredible. I'd love to ask David, I'd love to get your perspective. When you get something like that, this was like over 2 years ago now. This was in 2019. Why does this stuff take so long?
It's quite amazing.
People suffering every day.
It's quite amazing, and places like the SENS Foundation have been, up until recently, still spouting the same old garbage, which is, you know, if they've spent since 1970, it's been 50 years now, trying to prove that aging is a result of accumulated mutations. They couldn't find accumulated mutations in the nucleus, so they said, then it's in the mitochondria. They can't find them in the mitochondria. I mean, it's very simple. We see with aging, we say that certain genes are turned on, or turned up rather, and certain genes are turned down. And interestingly enough, the genes that control energy production, that control repair, etc., are turned down.
Right.
The genes that are effectively destructive to us, the inflammatory cytokines, are turned up.
Right.
So I mean, that's what kills you in SARS, COVID-19, is not the virus, it's your own inflammatory cytokines. Produce a cytokine storm that overwhelms your body and fills your lungs and kills you.
Right. And so, I mean, you were just basically describing epigenetics. And so what we were talking about with David Sinclair's lab would be epigenetic cellular reprogramming.
Yeah.
And so basically, you know, I would assume pretty much everybody watching, if you've got this far along in the video, you know what epigenetics is, but we'll just basically give a real brief.
Basically, genes are very static structures. They contain a certain set amount of information, but when they're produced, how much they're produced, where they're produced, is all controlled by things that are above the gene. Epi means above, basically.
Right.
So they're controlled at a higher level.
A more important level.
A more significant level. Yeah. So, and it turns out that the level that may not be the top level of control at all. We just don't know.
Right.
It's just a lot we don't know at this point.
One of the things, I haven't heard you talk about this much, but David Sinclair talks a lot about it. It's the TET enzyme, which stands for 10-11 translocation enzyme. I have no idea where that name came from. I don't know if you have any idea.
I meant to look it up. Yeah. It converts methylated cytosines into hydroxymethylated cytosines, and then they can be easily removed.
Okay, so to kind of translate that, I'll do my best in layman's terms, and you can tell me if I did a good job or not. So the C, you have A, C, T, and G for your DNA.
Yeah, these are the nucleotide bases of the DNA. They're all strung together in a great long chain, 3 billion nucleotides long.
Right, and then we've been talking a lot about Steve Horvath and all of the clocks that he's helped develop at UCLA. And these epigenetic DNA methylation clocks, they're measuring the actual methylation pattern, the methyl that's actually binded to that C. For whatever reason, which we don't know, it binds to the C and not any of the A, T, or G.
Right.
And so my understanding is that
No, by the way, you know, part of that is an artifact. We don't really know what else might bind to A, T, C, or G. We happen to luck out having what's called a bisulfate assay that recognizes methylated Cs and removes them.
Okay.
So, you know, we deal with the information we have. That's all we can do. I want people to understand that there's real hope. People have given up on science, and I think our inability to, for instance, solve the aging problem is one of the major reasons. What's the purpose of anything if you're going to die?
Right. Well, in medicine...
I mean, I assume everybody's going to die eventually. And if the religions want to make a big point of it, I'll say, well, you know, you may live 1,000,000 years, but you'll still have an eternity of death.
Yeah, that's true. And we had an eternity of death before any of us were born either.
Exactly. So. I've been unalive for 3.7 billion years, and it passed like that.
13.7.
13.7.
And who knows what happened before the Big Bang? You know,
right, exactly.
It looks like we're probably in a multiverse, and maybe there's infinite universes. I mean, who knows? People get too caught up in all this stuff.
Right.
We're just trying to make people as healthy as possible, right? Isn't that what this is?
I mean,
essentially all about?
has medicine ever been anything else?
It's what it should be, right?
Yeah,
good medicine.
Well, that's what it is. So this is, I think, one of the ultimate medicines. There are a lot of things we don't know. For instance, will it help with cancer or will it hurt cancer? Will the body's defenses suddenly rise up, or will it invigorate cancer cells and give them that extra push they need? Right. So my own thought is that young animals don't get cancer, you know, so we make them effectively young again.
For the most part, very rarely. Right?
Well, I mean,
extremely
they get hereditary cancers for sure.
But
you know, that's why Akshay was asking me yesterday about these various models of cancer. Models are what scientists call animals that have apparently human diseases, or they're models for human disease. But I don't trust any of them. All of them have been bred so that they develop a particular disease. They have a particular insufficiency or deformity that allows them, that forces them to develop a disease. No, I want to see it spontaneous. I want to see that the old rats get cancers, which is very common among rats. Tumors, cancers is very common, and our rats don't. That's what I want to see.
Exactly.
To me, that's the proof. No model where you introduce an oncogene and then expect preventing aging is going to stop it from
Put simply, your focus and the focus of Yuvan Research and the hope and the belief for E5 is that it's going to be increasing health span and lifespan.
Correct.
Or increasing healthy lifespan.
Well, it will be increasing health span and lifespan, but that's only the beginning. It'll be giving you back your youth.
Right.
It'll be giving you back your energy, your mental plasticity.
Actually, truly reversing aging.
Truly reversing aging.
Right.
And the only question then becomes, how many times can you do it? So far, we're on our third time so far.
With the rats, right?
With the rats.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to get back real briefly to what we were talking about with the TET enzyme and how it, the methylation, the methyl groups bind to the C for some reason. And so,
let me just say that there are C is one of the 4 nucleotides, and obviously it's present everywhere in the DNA. But in certain portions, you see a sequence of a C followed by a G. Now, it turns out that a C followed by a G should be just as frequent as a C followed by a C or an A or a T, but it's not. It's statistically rare. And typically, these are found in what are called CPG islands. C is the cytosine. P is the phosphate bond that connects it to the next nucleotide. G is guanine. And when these Cs are methylated, when methyl groups are added to them by methylating enzyme, methyltransferases, they slow down or sometimes speed up, depending on the gene, the transcription, that is the production of that particular gene.
right.
So at every age, there's really a different set of transcripts produced by any cell. A cell goes through many different states.
And we've actually, at Lifespan News, we've reported on a transcriptomics-based clock, an aging clock. And it seems to be incredibly accurate from initial research. Have you guys looked into any transcriptomics
I predicted that years and years ago. When we have Steve Horvath clock, we have the best. We don't have to. We were very fortunate. I wrote from him. I'm a relatively obscure person. Once my daughter asked me if I was famous, I said locally. When I was teaching on some air base in Japan. There's a kind of a Benjamin Button effect in all of this. You don't grow young immediately. You grow younger in parts. And I think it's a question of improvement in cells, youthening cells epigenetically, improves tissues, which improves organs, which improves organ systems, etc.
So, but you believe it's...
So I think it takes time.
Right, it takes a lot of time, but it's the blood mainly, right?
It's the blood.
That's having the
factors in the
epigenetic
blood.
effect on the cells,
Correct.
Right? Okay, just want that to be clear. Getting back real quick to, this is my fascination. I've never actually asked, a scientist this. It's just something that I've thought about and haven't been able to find the answer. I've done Google searches and stuff. We just talked about how the methylation binds to the C, and I've researched telomeres like crazy for many years. I had my
Yeah,
telomeres measured in 2013.
telomeres were real big at one point.
Right, and the telomere code is TTAGGG. And so do you find it interesting that there's no C in telomere, and is that just a
that's
coincidence?
kind of interesting.
And the C is
No,
what
I
is actually...
hadn't really considered that.
Exactly, so the C is what the methyl is binding to, and that seems to now be incredibly important for aging. It might even be the most important thing for reversing aging based off, what we just talked about in this interview with David Sinclair. So yeah, maybe I've struck your curiosity there. I don't know. I don't know what else to say about it other than that. Just find it interesting.
Well, I mean, mice, for example, have telomeres much longer than ours.
Right.
And they don't shorten with age.
Right.
When they artificially have them shorten with age by eliminating telomerase and letting them go generations with continual shortening, they start some human-appearing diseases of aging start appearing in mice that normally don't occur.
Right.
So I think the telomere is one of many mechanisms the body uses to assess aging and ultimately to keep lifespan as a species characteristic, just like, that's what I say, lifespan is a species characteristic, just like masses or stripes or...
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you mentioned telomerase. It's the telomerase enzyme is just a little natural microbioprinter that just prints out TTAGGG. That's what it does. It lengthens telomeres. But the funny thing about all this, which I think you've talked about in other interviews you've done, probably in your book, we'll get to your book here in just a moment, is that with many times in life, things work and we discover things or invent them or whatever kind of language you want to use. But sometimes even the inventor, discoverer, or people who are left with this technology who had nothing to do with it, who might have found it or come into possession of it in some manner, might not understand exactly how it works. We just know that it does work. So is there some of that? It seems like there's some of that going on with E5 to a certain extent.
There's definitely, I mean, we have a few clues. We know it's a multi-component substance. Ask your question again.
Well, I was just saying that sometimes we know that something works,
but
we don't know
pardon
how.
Me. Now I remember.
Or why it works.
Well, now I remember my answer. Unfortunately, I gave the answer in the book already. So it was very simple. Years before we ever heard of an electron, before anybody ever discovered electrons, people used electricity. In fact, it turns out the ancient Babylonians used electricity for electroplating. Probably to jip people to think they're buying a gold vessel when they're buying tin. But
and so, okay, Harold. So I want to talk about just the business and money aspect of this, just real briefly at the high level, and I'll just share my perspective. So it seems pretty clear to me that you're not like a wealthy person, right? You're not a billionaire, right? And so I've seen certain critiques from people on the internet of like, well, why does Yuvan Research and Harold want to keep it proprietary and stuff? And let me just say, to me, like if you have discovered this, I have no problem with Yuvan Research or yourself personally or Akshay or both of you becoming billionaires, trillionaires, quadrillionaires, centillionaires, septillionaires, whatever, like wealthiest people on the planet. If you really are creating the best medicine ever, then you deserve whatever the free market can give you.
That's the way we look at it, and
that's my perspective.
And I quite understand the other perspective, which is this is something that mankind needs. Certainly, if it cures diseases of aging, it's something that mankind needs, and it's certainly our object to make it as available as quickly as possible. But we have lots of people who've invested lots of money, time, and effort in this, and it would not be fair to them to give it away. We can only hope to do our best, recruit the best talent, recruit the best people, equipment, etc., and get it out there as quickly as we possibly can. That's our desire, and our desire is to get it out there as quickly as possible, and profit is not our motive.
But money's a real thing that we all have to live in. Money
is one thing. Right. I remember once asking my sister about this. My sister Barbara. She's a clinical psychologist. Actually a physiological psychologist. But I said, how does that sound to you? You know, being young again, living multiple years. She said, would I have to continue working?
Right. And yeah, that's we might not want to get into that at this point in time, but these are big questions, right? And so there's technology, universal basic income has become more popular over the last few years and things like that. And you know, financial freedom, I think, is really important for people so that they can do what they want to do and not have to be beholden to certain power structures to keep doing a job if they don't want to do it, right? And so if we all are given this gift of being able to live, you know, essentially indefinitely, if we become biologically immortal, potentially, and we're not saying that E5 is going to be that, it might be, it might not, it's still too early, but if it just even buys us more healthy years, then that just gives us more time to iterate and keep iterating. So in that respect, E5 might be version 1 of like the smartphone, for example, right? And it's 2021, we're not on version 1 anymore.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. I completely agree with you. This is the beginning, and we expect to make improvements. We expect to make improvements in E5. Ultimately, humankind will make improvements in E5, and instead of, you know, my dream is instead of treating aging when people are aged, we'll start treating it while people are still young, and there's no reason people should ever become old. It'll be a thing of the past.
Biologically old. People can get us chronologically older.
Chronologically
older. We want people to get chronologically older.
People. Some people are confused. One of the questions when I used to teach biology of aging, one of the first things my students would say is, "Yeah, but when you age, you get wise." And I try to tell them that's not an aspect of age per se. It's an aspect of experience. It's an aspect of time, and yeah.
And so you just mentioned the word dream a few moments ago. I mean, we have to talk about your 1984 near death. You had a bacterial infection, your face blew up, and you had a doctor save you, and you had a dream, right? Tell us about that.
I had a tooth that was rotten in any case, and I went to my dentist, who also happened to be my building manager.
A dentist building manager.
Yeah,
in 1984.
USC. Yeah.
Okay.
And he kept on putting it off, and then I finally went to his office. I said, "Look at it; it's all swollen." He said, "Oh yeah, it's too late for me to do anything about that. You'd better see a doctor." So by this stage,
so is it fair to say he's a better building manager than a dentist then?
I guess.
Okay, sorry, continue.
But by this stage, my neck had grown to about the size of a football. And I took a public bus down Vermont Avenue to
what city? What city
Kaiser
are you in?
Permanente. I was in Los Angeles at the time.
So this is USC. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
I took a bus to Kaiser Permanente, and I had called them and told them, and they were expecting me. And I got to Kaiser Permanente, and I went to the emergency room and said, "Well, we have no record of this. Just sit down and wait." And there were possibly 300 people ahead of me. And I was starting to feel really ill. And I'm not even sure I would have lived. And then this doctor came in. I'm trying to remember his name. His name, Golan, Dr. Golan. Came in and says, "Harold Katcher here." in the emergency room. Yeah.
I'm kind of still here. Can you help me, Doc?
And he took me up and he took one look at me, and he actually started injecting my neck with, and started cutting actually before the injections had time to take effect.
Wow.
I said, Doc, I'm gonna pass out. He said, no, you're not. And the next thing I knew, I woke up in a room with a tube in my neck, going through my throat, and lights blinking, red lights blinking on and off. And at that point, I wondered, am I going to live? Because I knew the sort of, it was Bacillus fragilis. It was a very hard to treat organism. And I had this dream. And in the dream, I was on a raised platform, a dais or something, and I was watching troops marching in front of me. And it looked odd. Everything felt heavy, and the troops, the sun was small and red. And I realized I wasn't on Earth. And I realized that, and somebody said so, that the procession was there to honor me for having brought immortality to mankind.
And this was in 1984, right?
This is 1980. Yeah, this is.
And so you had been curious about aging for years before that,
years,
right?
and I had given up on the concept. And at that stage, I decided, no, I'm not interested in working with these folks anymore. I frankly didn't like most of them. Very.
Because of their rigid perceptions of the theory of aging.
Well,
the time,
not so much. No, we weren't working on that at all. We were working on BRCA1, the cancer gene.
Right.
And we had finally discovered, but they were real prima donnas, and some of them, I wouldn't be surprised if they would wreck other people's experiments just to advance their own.
So disgusting, right? It's the
yeah,
opposite of
very
science
disgusting.
And progress, right? It's all about ego and power and money, right?
Like almost everything else in human.
Right.
So.
And so I heard you talk about this dream when Nicolas interviewed you in that, I believe, February 2021 interview, and you said this dream is something is very vivid and something that's kind of been recurring and something that motivates you and drives you.
Well, it doesn't recur. I just picture it again and again. And
right,
it's not like I dream it again and again.
You only had the dream once, right?
I had the dream once, and it's one of the things that changed my life, because I said to myself, though, this is crazy. How could I, who have really nothing to do with aging research anymore, and I had kind of given up on science, I decided to become a programmer.
Self-taught programmer, correct?
Self-taught programmer,
right.
Yeah. In the C language. Well, I started in a different language, but it was fun and it paid good money, and I no longer believed that aging really had any possible cure until, as I told you.
So you're kind of thinking, like, what is this dream?
This dream is
weird, right? 'Cause
weird,
it didn't make any sense to you at the time.
Nonsense. I finally got back into academia after programming, but I was an academic director. I was an administrator. I had no laboratory facilities. So it was clearly crazy, and
when did you start to think maybe that dream wasn't so crazy?
In 2009,
when you read that paper.
I read that paper, all of a sudden I realized, no, this is not crazy, and I think I know how to cure aging.
And let's just talk about that.
I try to contact everybody, all of the names.
So you have Michael and Irina Comboy, who are the married couple. We're in Mountain View, California. SENS Research Foundation is just right down the street.
Correct.
We have the unfortunate stuff going on with the accusations with Dr. Aubrey de Grey right now, which I'm personally staying out of, but you know, have to at least mention it. We'll see how that all unfolds. I just want the truth to come out and want us to be able to move forward as a community with
Correct.
what's determined to be the best way to do that.
Correct.
But so it was Dr. Michael and Irina Comboy at UC Berkeley, which is just across the bay here in Berkeley. And, they've done their parabiosis research. And so, yeah, continue. I was just setting it up, sharing a little bit more details.
Well, it all boils down to this. The basic theory that most scientists have of aging is that cells age, consequently tissues age, made of cells.
Right.
And organs made of tissues age, blah, blah, blah. I say that's wrong. Cells do not age. You can take cells from old people and they're visibly, biochemically, structurally different from cells from young people. But if you take that same cell from an old person and put it in a young person, you'll see it change back to the youthful phenotype.
And we now have the Yamanaka factors as well, where we can actually reverse the aging all the way back to pluripotency.
Correct.
The youngest state. The problem is that it just causes the teratoma, the cancers and stuff. But
right. Well,
in most cases, but we've already shown with the eye mouse at Dr. David Sinclair's lab how it did not have any of the negative side effects.
But
it just reversed
there's
the eye.
quite a difference between working in vitro in a glass jar and working in living animals.
Right.
But the principle is demonstrated by that as well, that aging is reversible. Recently, there are a few main theories of aging. One of them is by a man named Tom Kirkwood, who's British, who has what he calls the disposable soma theory of aging, which is basically that your soma, your body, is a vehicle for carrying your genes and reproducing yourself. And the only thing nature really cares about is you're reproducing yourself in as accurate a manner as possible. So Kirkwood said the body reserves its energy and relegates those repair functions. I mean, how much energy could repair functions take? You have to think to yourself.
Right.
But his basic contention is not enough energy in nature for both repair and reproduction. So only the germline cells keep themselves pure and free of defects. Other cells, they just allow defects to occur. Well, we know, for instance, that's not true. We know that all cells have repair systems.
Right.
And lately it's become even less true in that it was recently found that embryos retain their maternal age up until gastrulation, when their own genome kicks in, and then they reset their epigenetic clocks to 0. So it's not even true that the germline maintains perfect fidelity. Just at some point, rejuvenation appears to be a natural process that actually reverses the age of the cell. So it's not that we've invented something totally new. We've just discovered some natural processes.
Yeah, language is interesting. I'm a corporate communications major, and I took some linguistics courses, and a lot of this stuff can get confusing. Is aging programmed or not? It's like, well, what do you mean by programming, and semantics and things like that. So it's very interesting. Just to have to define the terms. I want to touch upon two final things for sure. We can talk about any other things you want to talk about, but we got to get into the book as the final thing. And once again, a plug: September 4th, 2021. If you're in the San Francisco Bay Area, come on out. We'll have a link in the description below to the location.
And I'll sign your book.
And yeah, Harold will sign your book. But the other thing, I wanted to focus a little bit more from the business aspect of Yuvan Research. Nicholas asked you towards the end of his interview with you in February 2021, what can people do to help? And, you can watch that video to see your answer. But right now in August, if people really do want to help in any way, financially, media, scientifically, what can people do to help? Or would you rather them just stay out of the way? How do you answer that?
I'm a scientist. I actually started a company a while ago, and not this company. It was a totally separate company many decades ago. I actually became one of the world's largest producers of something called V8 protease. But basically, I'm a scientist, and I know nothing about the money, the financial aspects. So my interest is in making large amounts of E5 at a reasonable price. That's it.
Okay, great.
So would I love people to help? I would love people to help. We can't even find a decent technician. We find people who have all kinds of resumes that say all kinds of wonderful stuff, and then when it comes to actually doing it,
right? Yeah, that's
something I took as an undergraduate 15 years ago.
Super frustrating when people say whatever to get the job, and then you're like, what? I don't know how to do this. Thank you for that answer, Harold. I'll just say that, myself and Longevity Plan, we'd love to do whatever we can within our resources. We can't make any promises.
I'd love to have graduate students. I'd love to have research associates. I'd love to have people I can actually speak to about stuff. My assistant is a great young man. He left just a little while ago, Jay Arora. Came from India. He was one of our first investors. His family is in transportation, but he has a degree in finance, and he hated biology as a student. He hated biology, but you can see him standing there with his pipette men, pipetting 50 microliters of this and 50, just continuously making up mixtures and he has some good ideas in that he's a complete newbie, so he doesn't know much science, to be honest.
Yeah, sometimes that can be good when you don't have all the bad ideas in your head and you're
so
fresh,
he can say, well, why not try such and such, and occasionally such and such works well.
Yeah, I'm a new father, relatively new. My son's 21 months young. He'll be 2 years in November 2021 here in a few months, and it's interesting to see how influential he is and how he just mimics everything. He mimics, I think we were joking before we turned the camera on, he just started saying the word no. So everything is no, 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 and I'll sometimes do that, so now he goes no, 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 like that, and that's all he says, pretty much that and dad, dad and stuff. But I'm not convinced that he knows that I'm dad, dad. He just says dad, dad, dad. But yeah, it's in any event.
I think you can believe his no, however.
Yeah. Oh no, he's recently actually started using the word no properly, which has been really helpful. Because with toddlers, oh my goodness, if you don't know what they want, it's a disaster. Okay, so that was really helpful, Harold, regarding the business aspects and stuff. I hope that you guys get whatever resources that you need, and
we're trying to make alliances with universities. I think that might be the best thing. That way we can advance our cause. And
so you view as showing the actual experiments of the rats progressing and showing the age reversal in every way possible as the best way with the resources that Yuvan Research currently has to create enough incentive or excitement or whatever the right word is for institutions and investors to come in and really take hold of the research. Is that fair to say, or am I?
Not exactly. We're relatively well funded. We're not desperate for funds. People, maybe. Somehow you'd think funds would bring people, but in this climate, it's kind of difficult.
Yeah, sometimes it's not just money. You need actually things. You need competent people with the skills to get things done. Right?
Yes,
so
exactly.
What would be some of those skills? Is there like a job posting somewhere or something?
We have job postings with several agencies, and
we'll try and link that in the description below in this YouTube video.
Yeah.
So, okay, Harold, so I guess the final thing is the book. You know, obviously we want people to buy the book and read it, but what are some things that you wanted to say about the book right now?
The book is different. It's a mixture of history and literature and mythology and science, and even a bunch about Christianity and Judaism, our thoughts about immortality and the soul. The entire idea of the immortal soul is given a look-see here, because it became part of Christian theology, not through Jesus, who never believed in an immortal soul. He believed in resurrection, that you would be resurrected in a perfect body. The dead are dead. They hear, they don't see, they don't hear, they nothing. And it was replaced with the Platonic and then Aristotelian ideas about the soul, and kind of changed a little bit so as to give them control over you even after your death.
Right, yeah, for sure.
So it was a little controversial there, but then I go into the biology of it, and I say things like, you know, if death is I explain, for instance, the circular reasoning behind Medawar's theory of how aging genes can happen, and then I go through the evidence, and largely some of the evidence, you know, science is so fragmented. People who are expert in one area know nothing about another area. So, for instance, this theory of Medawar's about genes, it makes sense unless you look at nature and you see that animals with high predation rates live short lives, reproduce quickly.
Right, like rabbits, right?
Like rabbits.
Right, yeah.
and vice versa for animals that are a squirrel, about the same size as a rat, and the same, not the same genus, but the same family anyway, lives 25 to 30 years. A rat lives 3 years.
Wait, and we're humans. We're at the top of the food chain at this current time on planet Earth, and we live pretty darn long compared to most animals. You know, so you
take an elephant. Well, of course, take a blue whale, and they live 200 years. Take an Iceland shark. The female doesn't become fertile until she's 150 years old.
Unbelievable. Sorry about the camera moving around a little bit here. This has been my first in-person interview since late January 2021 at Longevity Therapeutics in San Francisco. Due to the COVID-19 crisis, you know, all the interviews have been moved online to just Zoom, and had a little bit of problems with the tripod, my Osmo here. So we've had Nicolas holding on, trying to hold it as steady as possible the whole time. So again, apologize. Thanks for bearing with us here.
Towards the end of the book, I explain that lifespan is a species characteristic, and that it helps an animal fit into its ecological niche. And it's quite necessary. It's actually a kindness on nature's part. You know, you take the turquoise killifish. It's become very popular as an aging model because it only lives a few months. It lives all over Africa in ponds that dry up. And in places where the ponds dry up in 3 months, the killifish lives 3 months. So it lives a complete life, dies and reproduces by the time the pond dries up.
Wow.
While in other places, it may take 7 months for the pond to dry up, and the killifish lives 7 months.
Bizarre, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll tell you another. So I think most people know about the immortal jellyfish. At least people who are watching this video, it got this far in it. But one thing that we reported on Lifespan News a few months ago is the big mouth buffalo fish. Have you heard of that? I'd never heard of it either. So we reported on it because the paper just came out. They studied big mouth buffalo fish from age, I think, 2 to age 100. These fish live to 100. And the very interesting thing that shocked me is that not only do these fish show no signs of biological aging, but they actually are getting healthier as they're getting older.
And why did they die?
They don't die from senescence. They die from, that the scientists could tell, they die from predation, they die from starvation, they die from infections, but they're not dying from aging.
And they say, I can't swear to this.
What other things are we going to find like that, right?
I can't swear to this, but I've heard the same thing about sharks, that they don't age either. At some point, the ratio of gill area to body mass becomes too small to support themselves, and they die. They just keep on growing.
Right. So yeah, a lot of people, it actually just happened this morning. A new friend of mine was messaging me and saying, do you want to be immortal? Like, do you want people to be immortal or not? Like, oh, I don't want to live to be immortal is what this person said. And I just said, I just want to stay as healthy as possible indefinitely. Yeah. And if I ever don't like life anymore, then I can just kill myself. I have the ability to commit suicide.
Just stop taking E5.
Or stop taking E5, whatever. But these questions to me are just really silly. And the thought, I don't think people...
Nobody's going to force you to become immortal.
Right. And people haven't reverse engineered their question either, because they don't realize that if these therapies are available to make you as healthy as possible, and it's very cheap and widely distributed and widely known, then anybody who wants to stop that is probably going to have some adversaries coming after them. They're going to be the bad person if they're trying to stop the distribution of people just trying to be as healthy as possible. I don't think many people...
Well, I don't know. DeSantis in Florida seems to be using that tactic.
Well, yeah, I know what you mean on that, but... it's a crazy world out there, and people have different perspectives on different things. But that's how I see it, and I could be wrong, but that's how I very clearly see it. So I really appreciate your time, Harold, and everything that you and Yuvan Research are doing. I encourage people to once again go out to the book event on September 4th.
I think you'll find it interesting. I'm personally not. I have my publisher here. I shouldn't say this. I'm not so personally interested in the money as I am in the dissemination of the knowledge, because I think it gives people hope, real hope, that we can do something about aging, that we can reverse aging, that we can change the human condition. How much of humanity is based on the fact that we die? From the pyramids of the pharaohs to, I don't know what. In my book, I give the story of Gilgamesh, an ancient Sumerian king.
I read the first chapter last night. I read the whole chapter, and I loved that story. It was great.
And Enkidu, and we're at the same place now, 4,000 years later, that they were at, and we're saying, well, what's the purpose of life? And finally, Gilgamesh gives up any kind of search for extended life and just becomes proud of the city walls of Uruk, his city, and his accomplishments while he lived, and the fact that his name may live after him. And 4,000, as I said, 4,000 years later, we still know his name, so he was right about that. But we've learned a lot since then. And now, unfortunately, some of what we learned was wrong, and it's much worse. Biology needs a new start. I think there are lots of things we haven't been considering. A biological organism is the most complex thing on Earth, and we haven't. We have all of these lame theories to, for example, I remember reading a paper years ago telling why mice don't live as long as human beings. Mm-hmm. Turns out that's because they have a DNA repair enzyme that's not as good as ours.
Right, sure.
So,
that's it, yeah. Well, and people, I think that asking the right questions is what we should focus on. And what is the meaning to life is, to me, not the right question, because it's just such a weird phrase question. Because I'm very pragmatic. And to me, the only pragmatic answer to that is that, well, the only meaning to life is that which you attribute towards it. You yourself get to determine what you want to do if you are a free individual.
Yeah.
And, unfortunately, some power structures might be influencing people more than others in places on this planet at this point in time and throughout history. But that's why I'm a big proponent of freedom, so that people can just determine whatever they want the meaning to life, to learn their life to be, and then just go after it. And so this is what you're doing, and
that's exactly what I'm doing. And I'm, to be honest with you, I'm proud of myself, because I've done all those things that I've read other people have done, and that seemed hard, and I did it. Even just going out to India to do this research at age 70 took honestly a lot of guts on my part. I could hardly walk down the walkway at that point.
Right.
So I do what Jay always tells me to do. It's an advertisement for some beer, I think, in India. You have one life, live it large.
There you go.
So,
we in America, the kids these days are calling YOLO, right? You only live once, YOLO. So it's kind of the same thing, just repackaged. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. But Harold, I really appreciate your time and inviting me, or not necessarily inviting me, but Nicolas helped set this up, but allowing me here into your apartment here in Mountain View. And I believe you're 77 years old chronologically right now. Do you have any interest in sharing anything that you're not taking E5 yet, but do you have any interest in sharing, like if you're taking anything or doing anything, or your own personal health?
I tell you the truth. I've been taking melatonin since it first came out, and I think that's fairly important.
At night before you go to bed.
At night before I go to bed. Supposedly an antioxidant, but they've shown that it reduces cancers and things like that. So I don't know. I can't really say that it's been anything. My dad, for example, he basically committed suicide at age 98. Because he refused to take his medications.
He was just done with life.
He said, there's nothing for me anymore. He was deaf, for one, and I'm getting deaf myself. But unlike him, I plan to get a hearing aid. But he lost his interest. He used to be a big fan of science fiction and mystery stories, and he just lost his interest in everything, and the only way he could speak to people was by writing and having them write to him. I mean, I would do it, of course. I'm his son, but how many other people would do it?
And so just to be 100% clear to people who might potentially be confused, is what E5 will hopefully do, or whatever E5 evolves into, or whatever biorejuvenation therapies that I want and that I'm hopeful for, is that we won't have that scenario anymore.
Yes.
Unless people, for some weird sadistic reason, want that. If they will have medicine to keep people as healthy as possible, and they can either choose to take it, and hopefully, from what you've said here from an economic standpoint, this should be a medicine that most people in the first world at least can afford. Is that fair?
Yes.
Yeah. Because the ingredients that are in it, which you're not sharing due to IP, right? We've already gone over that. But they're available resources that are not expensive, right? And so essentially, Yuvan Research will be selling these to make, you know, a profit, you guys determined, but nothing that most people in the first world can't afford.
Right. We're not out to make extraordinary profits, and I don't think any of us really care all that much about money. Of course, you like to pay the bills.
Right. Money makes the world go round. We're in a world where money does matter, but that's not, the focus is to make people, as many people as healthy as possible.
That's exactly right.
Possible, who need it and
That's
who want
exactly
it.
right.
Okay, so that's very clear.
That's part of it, and part of it is changing the way we think about life and biology and et cetera, and really a new start in biology. There's a lot that I can't tell you, but let me tell you, I've said this before, it sounds trite in my ears, but we have come across a new continent. We've seen a peak, but that's it. There's a whole world of stuff we know nothing about that has potential to change the world in major ways.
Change everything. Right.
And we're just discovering this. We're just coming across this.
There's actually two other, I think, important questions that just kind of came to me that I want to definitely ask you is, you're working clearly with Dr. Steve Horvath, who, again, like, if you guys don't know who he is, he's a very prestigious PhD at UCLA who's developed these aging epigenetic DNA methylation-based clocks. And it's not just him. He's had a whole team of people. He worked with Morgan Levine, who helped develop PhenoAge at UCLA. She's now at Yale, and she's also at Elysium. Are you working with any other people that in the aging field that people might recognize that you would like to disclose? I already can see your face smirking a little bit, but just wanted to give you an opportunity at least to share that if you want to.
Well, let me say, the way the environment is now, we're working against a lot of people in the aging field.
No, and some people know that I'm doing this interview, and I felt some of that, from private messages from certain people as well, so I won't say that. But again, I'll just say, I'm just here to report the information as best as possible the way I see it, and I personally see you as a good faith actor who I'm really excited to read your book, and I'm rooting for you guys. I'm rooting for any entity who's going to help make people healthier as quickly as possible, solve the human aging problem, as I like to refer to it. Because the reason is there are a lot of people suffering. Before COVID-19, it was true that 110,000 people every single day on average die from aging or age-related diseases. And just to clarify, like, that's Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, cancer, heart disease is number one, osteoarthritis, osteoporosis, you have sarcopenia, people get old and frail and then they fall and they break a bone. That's what happened to my wife's grandmother. She just had her 97th birthday a couple of weeks ago, but in December 2018, she was living on her own and she fell and broke her hip. Not living on her own anymore.
It's very, very, very typical.
And this is the world that we're living.
Pneumonia follows usually because people are bedridden for...
She had a pretty miraculous recovery. We went and visited her in the hospital, and she got much better. And a lot of the nurses one of the nurses in the hallway, said, she's doing great. Like, she was surprising a lot of the staff because they normally see people of that age. I think she was 94 at the time. They don't recover very well after a fall like that. So this is the reality. Then with COVID-19, again, the foremost risk factor for morbidity and mortality for COVID-19 is aging, chronological aging. But if we can use these bioaging clocks that Steve Horvath has pioneered, like that we hope to be reselling soon at the Clock Foundation, then I know that we will show that actually the foremost risk factor for COVID-19 morbidity and mortality is actually biological age, not chronological.
Correct.
So we can say, hey, you might be 74 years old chronologically, but this Clock Foundation kit shows that you're actually 87. Therefore, your risk factor for COVID-19 morbidity and mortality is much higher. And so we can really help people from that perspective, and then we could then maybe get E5 or whatever you call it or whatever it ends up being to those people first who need it the most. I don't know. It's just...
To me, you mentioned biological age versus chronological age. And to me, biological age is simply the progress you make through your life stages.
Right.
And that's it. It can be quick or it can be long.
Well, because we know there's a disease called progeria, which is basically accelerated aging. What's your thoughts on progeria?
I was thinking about progeria, honestly, and I unfortunately, some of my thoughts are IP related, but I was wondering about laminase's use in for other purposes than simply providing a coating for the inside of the nucleus. But that's all I want to say at this point.
We do know that the telomeres are incredibly short with progeria, and it's not just telomeres, it's all sorts of things. It's just damage, and I think it's been a while since I've researched this, but the kids that are born with progeria, they're born with it. I don't think they live past like 20, like hardly ever. It's very rare.
Oh, hardly ever, yeah.
I think they die most of them.
I think there was somebody who lived into his 30s.
And it's an incredibly rare disease at any point in time. I think there's only maybe about 30 to 100 people or kids on the planet with progeria out of 7.9 billion people. I think there's currently 7.88 billion people on the planet. So in any event, Harold, that was about the scientists, other scientists that you're working with is a question that I wanted to ask you. And then I guess I'll just kick it to you to end.
Well, we are working also with Rudy Goya.
Right.
Sort of peripherally, but he has many of the same ideas that we do. And we think we're right, and we know we're right, actually. And you'll see the changes yourself in the next few years. So.
Okay. Is there any final thoughts you want to share?
Final thought is maybe a controversial one. There are all kinds of religions, and they all have their holy books. And all of them say that their book is written by God, and everybody else says no. It's our book that's written by God. And yet, and I am a believer, and yet I believe there's one book written by God that's irrefutable, and that's the universe. That's the existence. That's what is. And science is the study of that. And now I think maybe science is really our way of looking into the, quote, mind of God, to see what's been created, to know the truth of what's happening. Because even your Christian Bible says the truth shall set you free. And that's all I'm interested in, is the truth. And I think the truth is that we have a potential for much, much longer lives. I think we have a potential to colonize the galaxy. Who knows how far? Yes, I think so. I don't think we're stuck here on Earth. I think this is a beginning for us. And I think...
maybe it's already been done. Maybe Star Wars is true.
Maybe it's already been done.
A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, right?
Maybe right now these so-called, what do I call it, unidentified aerial phenomena or UFOs.
Right, that the Pentagon is now admitted to.
That the Pentagon is now admitted to. For all I know, they put the dream in my mind. For all I know, that's what we need to be an interstellar civilization. Long lives, because the speed of they may have even solved the speed of light problem, but
we know quantum entanglement. We know that they've taken the particles further and further away over the years, and they've shown that those particles communicate. Instantaneously. So by definition, that communication is occurring faster than the speed of light.
Yes.
Which is
but you can't transmit information by that means.
Well, the information is translated. If the information is given to one, it's immediately transferred to the other one.
Right, but the only way you can know that is by having light travel
Right.
to that, or come back from there.
Right.
So
I haven't researched this for a few years, but they had done it a few miles away. They had separated the quantum entangled particles a few miles.
yeah,
And they showed instantaneous
I have no
communication.
doubt that if it were possible, if you could bring one of the entangled particles to Alpha Centauri, it would still have the same reaction.
Exactly, yeah. That's my belief as well. It's what the science clearly indicates at this point in time. Okay, Harold, all right, final thoughts for you?
Well, the final thoughts.
Yeah, final. I don't know, I wanted to give you the last word, so you can even just say goodbye. I just want you to have the last word.
All I want to say is keep your eyes open, expect the unexpected, have hope. I think there's great reason at this point to have hope. I mean, if I didn't think so, believe me, I would much rather be at home with my wife in Salt Lake City. Jay's a nice guy after all, but still, and not having to work in a laboratory for hours and hours and days without end. It's certainly it's not for the money.
Right.
Because at my age, what the heck do you need it for? That's it. I think I'm right. I think biology is going to change. The world is going to change, and I think it's going to start from approximately now. That's it.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.